Welcome to our call here. Super excited to be speaking with you today. We've been engaged over the last year or so, working with you and Uncommon Farms, understanding how you function, and also you've shared so much about your experiences in this space, and that's definitely helped shape our vision, our direction, also our product, and we're ever grateful for that. So it's really exciting to kind of have you on this webcast and pick your brains on some important matters related to this topic. So welcome on the call.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm certainly a big believer in what Oaken is doing and what you guys are all about.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Right. So wanted to get started, Dave, by just asking a few questions about Uncommon Farms. Now, this is an organization that's been in existence for several years, has a large membership base, and does a wide variety of things for its members. So if you could just set the context for our listeners, for our viewers, about Uncommon Farms, we'd be really grateful.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that opportunity. So Uncommon Farms actually started about 56 years ago. Most people have no idea that the organization is that old. And it started just doing accounting for farms. And then over the years, we have added some other services. We actually developed some ag-specific accounting software, and then added some financial consulting, and that was the company for a good number of years. And all we do is just work with family-owned farms, and the name has changed a couple of times over the decades. And then about 17 years ago, we launched a new division of the company because we realized that farms need help in areas beyond just accounting and finance. And so there's a variety of other business areas that we help farms with. In fact, we really get very little into anything as it pertains to the growing of crops. We really focus on the business side of running a farm. And we have kind of 5 core focus areas, which include strategic planning, human resources, succession planning and business entity structure, management and leadership, and then we have a variety of other areas as well. There's about 14 in total. And in a nutshell, Shashi, we help farms to derive a vision for their farm's future. Some farms have one, and that's great. And if they don't, that's okay. We'll help them derive one. But once a farm has one, then most importantly, we want to make sure that that vision comes true. And in doing that, we put emphasis on I think 3 main things. One is coaching for accountability. That's being that farm's accountability partner, if you will, to help farms make sure that they stay focused on the important things, not only the urgent things, which unfortunately happens so much in farming. Next would be peer group sharing. We believe very strongly in that notion that iron sharpens iron. And there's a lot to be gained from networking and sharing of best practices with other farms, benchmarking with them in a host of different areas. And then the last area would be kind of that sense of community, right, between growers, between the subject matter experts that we have on staff, as well as our strategic vendor partners such as Oaken.
Awesome. No, that's great to hear. And I know Uncommon Farms have evolved over the past several years into now a fairly large organization. You operate in, I think, 20 states in the US and also in Canada as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. We have farms that we work with. Again, the only thing we do is work with family-owned farms in 20 US states and actually 3 Canadian provinces.
You've had, in your tenure at Uncommon Farms, and also previous to that, you've had multiple different roles. Take us through your journey a little bit as well. I mean, just before you entered Uncommon Farms, and then as you entered this organization, you've seen it evolve over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years or so now. What's it been like for you? And then how have you seen this organization change?
Well, we could probably spend about an hour or more just talking about that question right there. I'll try to make it as short of an answer to a long question that I can. So my grandfather was a farmer in Northwest Ohio. My parents didn't farm. My dad was a teacher, but I worked on a farm when I was young, and to this day, I still say it's the best job I ever had. I just loved it. I loved it because of the ability to work on so many different things, and also a sense of accomplishment. And so I really enjoyed my years doing that. Then when you start looking more at my, quote unquote career, I ran 3 small businesses for about 7 years. But then most of my career was spent in management, in sales and marketing, and a little bit in PR, kind of scattered across a few different industries. I happened to have the opportunity to be part of the team that actually launched Expedia. Everybody kind of knows Expedia. And so that was one thing that was kind of fun to work on, amongst other things in my life. But I've been back in ag for the last 15 years, all that here with Uncommon Farms. And truly, the company really has evolved in a number of ways. We always get better. We have this notion of continual improvement, and we advocate for farms that they always need to be getting better, right? If we want to be better tomorrow, we got to do something a little bit different, a little bit better today. So what are those things going to be? And so we try to bring that spirit of continual improvement here within our own company as we try to help farms do the same.
That's pretty amazing. And I know there's a little bit of stuff that you've probably not touched upon, but correct me here if I'm wrong. You are a math major, right? I mean, you had your this thing. That's something that always amazes me.
Yeah. So I have my undergraduate degree is in mathematics. I thought I wanted to be an actuary, and I did an internship as an actuary, and I learned that no, I do not want to be an actuary. But that's okay. That's okay. I kind of have, there's certain people that are kind of left-brained and other people that are right-brained, and then there's those poor souls like myself that really are kind of bifurcated between both. So yes, I was a math major in college, but then my master's is in marketing. So I kind of have this practical and creative sides in my head that are actually somewhat at conflict many times. But yeah.
No, that's incredible. That's one of those things that really stood out when we first met. I know you, it wasn't during the first meeting, but as I got to know you better, it kind of astounded me that you were a math major. It never struck my mind that way, but it was always good to know. So I thought I'd bring that up. But thanks for sharing a little bit about that journey, sure. Dave. And also at your work at Uncommon Farms, then walk us through what a typical day for you looks like. I mean, how do you help on a day-to-day basis? You said that you work with your members to make that one thing better today. What are some of those initiatives that you work on today at a very high level? And what keeps you up at night? And what keeps your members up at night?
So for me, the things that I work with our members on a daily basis, it's landowner relations, it's leases, it's really anything as it pertains to land or landowners. So we have farms that some of them might be looking to add some acres so that they can have a son or daughter come back to the farm, or others, they have no desire or intentions to grow. They just want to get better at what they do with the landowners that they serve now. And so really as it pertains to anything regarding land or landowners, that's kind of what I do. As far as a little bit more specifics, I'm thinking of one of our members in Texas who had a landowner who the tenant grower thought that what the landowner was asking for was a little extreme. And so I said, well, let's find out more. Let's not be confrontational here. Let's find out why the person was asking that. And so we developed a series of questions for them to walk through. And he reported back to me afterwards. He said it worked like a charm. So just that's just one example of something that I do. But I really do get a huge kick out of improving things. I always strive to whatever I touch, I want to leave it better than it was before I was involved with it. As far as what keeps me up at night, I suppose it's a little bit like farmers. I do have a lot of things on my plate. I have a variety of different roles and wear different hats. And there are some aspects of what I do that there really isn't anybody else that can do it. And so that notion of prioritizing my time and time management is something that is challenging, as I know it is for farms as well. As far as what keeps our farmers up at night, farming is pretty difficult. There's so much risk. It's hugely capital intensive, and obviously depend on the weather. So it's a tough profession. So if I had to say one thing that it keeps them up at night, it's probably its volatility, right? In the commodity markets and the weather and the input cost and employees, there's so many areas that there's so much volatility. And so, they're thinking about, how do I manage that volatility? How do I mitigate the risk that comes along with that volatility? And mitigating risk goes well beyond crop insurance. So many times when farms or in ag, we talk about mitigating risk, the thoughts kind of automatically go to crop insurance, but there's so many other ways. There's probably 106 other forms of risk that have nothing to do with crop insurance that farmers end up dealing with. And so, one of the things that I'm so appreciative of Oaken and what you guys are doing is that potentially brings some consistency and structure to their landowner relations efforts. And so that's maybe something, one less thing to worry about quite as much, so to speak.
You did touch upon the topic of risk, Dave, which is there's a lot of volatility in terms of prices or rents or crop prices, etc. Even output prices are not really controlled by the grower in many cases, especially in row crops, etc. Give us your perspective on how recent events, geopolitical or inflation or others, have impacted the sector, and where you see this going into the next, maybe 5 years or so, and put that in the context also broadly, and then specifically in the context of, where you see landowner relationships, the generational shift, and some of that dynamics working out and playing out for farmers.
Well, that's a big question. There'd be a variety of things to maybe touch upon there. First is certainly farms are getting larger, right? Consolidation is happening. It's already happened in most of the other sectors of ag. And now it's happening in the row crop sector, and has been for a number of years, but it's more noticeable here in the last 10, 15, 20 years. It can't happen as fast as the other ag sectors because the land is so capital intensive, it's so expensive. And there are several reasons why it's happening. There's fewer young people coming back to the farm. Technology allows more acres to be farmed. And when I say technology, I don't just mean the equipment technology, although obviously that's a big one, but I also lump, the new hybrids and biologicals and adjuvants. In my mind, that's kind of all part of technology in many ways. And so those things are just allowing yields to be greater, and then farms can farm more acres. As farms get bigger, then that means they're going to have more landowners. And so landowner relations becomes more and more important because you've got more people to take care of. And so farms have to devote more time than what they've done in the past to help make sure and maintain those relationships and to deliver on the service promise to those folks. Now, some of the other things going on as far as environmental and sustainability type things, that's a big buzzword in ag here recently. And I think many of those things are good. I mean, everybody can get better, not just farmers, but everybody can get better in a variety of ways. But I also think that there are some things going on that are being pushed that are just maybe simply not necessary. the general public doesn't really understand today's agriculture. The average person is actually 3 to 4 generations removed from farming. So the average person on the street, it's been their great grandfather that was involved in farming in some way, shape, or form. Well, people just don't know. It's not necessarily their fault, but for some reason there is this feeling that farmers don't take care of the land. And that could not be farther from the truth. Farmers have the biggest incentive to take care of the land because that land is what feeds their family. That's their main natural resource that they use. So they have a huge incentive to take care of the land. And by and large, farmers do that. And so we have politicians and sometimes academics that are setting policy, determining regulations, and many of them, they don't understand the practicality of some of the things that they're talking about. And so I know that gets frustrating for farmers, and I think justifiably so. And so anyway, some of the things that are going on I think are great. There are a few that I think are maybe just good sound bites, but I really question how much they help.
You did identify the growing size of the US farms, and that's presumably the case in Canada as well as in many other countries like Latin America. Now, talk to us a little bit about what that means, from a landowner perspective and also from a farmer perspective, having to manage many more landowner relationships in the process. In your 15 years, have you seen personally some of the members kind of grow their farming operations? How has that impacted the way that they look at their business? And talk to us in general about some of those aspects of farming.
So, yeah, farming is most definitely a business. It's not just a lifestyle, and farms need to take a business approach to it. And any business that has customers is in the people business. And people are funny. They're wonderful, but they'll drive you the drink at the same time. And whether that's family members, whether that's employees, whether that's vendors, or in this case, be that landowners, right? So one of the things we have to remember is just that, people are people. And so we need to keep that in mind sometimes. And I know that also farming has become way more competitive than it has been in the past. And so that means that farms need to get better at their landowner relations efforts. I know that, here at Uncommon Farms, we advocate that farms need to exceed their expectations and make the landowners feel valued. So those are kind of two core principles. And then there are a variety of different ways that they might do that. We actually have a landowner relations program with 20 different points that kind of fall into 7 different categories that all try to then deliver on those two principles of exceeding expectations and making the landowner feel valued. And so I tell you all that really to tell you this, that in order to do this, farms need to be structured. They need to be consistent. They need to be deliberate in the things that they do for their landowners. They can't just kind of wing it. They can't just let it happen. They need to have a plan. And that's one of the things in Uncommon Farms we try to do is help farms derive that plan and then execute it.
Share with us, Dave, some anecdotes if you can. You've talked about this plan. Share with us a couple of anecdotes, if possible. One case where the plans worked beautifully, it met the growers' objectives, whatever they may be. And maybe one case where it did not work out so well, and what was the ramification of not having managed that relationship well? Okay. Whatever you can share.
So I'll do the latter one first, and it's actually a story about myself. I used to have a tenant on some land that he just farmed one piece of land, and He wouldn't ever come talk to me. He would never send me anything. He would just leave my rent check in the mailbox, and maybe he would send me a text letting me know that he left the check in the mailbox. He farmed my land for, I think, 10 years. I think I saw him 3 times face to face. Would never share any information with me, would never give me soil test results, nothing. And so I would just ask anyone who would do that, it's like, how do you think that makes me feel? Do you think that makes me feel appreciated? Do you think I feel valued with that kind of approach? No, of course not. So I kept him on because I got so many great stories to tell as examples with what I do at work. So it was great to be able to use myself as the quote unquote bad example with some of the farms that we work with. And it wasn't a very big piece of land, so it didn't really matter that much. So anyway, that's one anecdote on that side. Now, on the other side, I could give you dozens. 2 quick ones is there's a farm we work with in Tennessee who recently they received a bid on some land. They were not the highest bidder. The reason the landowner selected them was because of their professionalism. And we guided them through exactly a particular process to use and assisted them with some tools, including questions, including putting together a bid proposal, including a variety of different things, and that portrayed that professionalism. So that's one example that comes to mind. Another one is someone who they had a landowner who their rent was really way too high. This was actually a few years ago when the ag economy was down. I think it was like 2015, 16, somewhere in there. And so they actually needed to renegotiate the rent down. Well, that's a tough question to ask somebody, or a tough conversation to have. And so again, we provided some tools to them to show them, hey, here's from an objective standpoint, here's where things lie, here's where things were when times were good, but here's now where it is now. And not every landowner is going to go for that, but most landowners are reasonable. And so they could see that. And so again, it was a process to follow that led to a lower rent for that particular grower. And it was justified, right? It was absolutely justified at the time, given the ag economics that were going on at that particular time.
Question that does crop up is, you mentioned that at Uncommon Farms, you have this 20-point kind of way in which you train your farms or your members to communicate with their land partners. Walk us through, at a high level, what that entails, and also how often is that training provided, and what benefits do members see out of that program? So
the training is kind of provided in a variety of different ways. We have a couple of webinars that we do every month. And this might be one of the topics that's covered in one of those webinars. We have an annual conference. And so we have a summer regional meeting. And so we have a variety of different avenues for delivering that. But then also it's just kind of one-on-one, which sometimes is best. And so I always tell all of our members, whenever you have a meeting with a prospective landowner or a current landowner, you ought to give me a call. We might talk for 5 minutes, we might talk for an hour and 5 minutes, but let's plan that meeting. Let's have a strategy. Let's know exactly what we're going to do, what we're going to ask, what we're going to say, and how we're going to say it. And so I had written a blog not too long ago that was entitled, plan your landowner meetings like you plan a vacation, right? You don't just throw stuff in the car and go, right? You think about where we're going to go, how we're going to get there, where are we going to stay, where are we going to eat, what are the activities that we're going to do while we're there. You put some thought and effort into it. Well, a landowner meeting needs to be approached that same way. And so have a plan, have a strategy, and sometimes having an outside third party like Uncommon Farms that you can bounce that off of and talk with and come up with that plan is very beneficial to farms.
In terms of, the best practices that you've seen, just kind of moving into a little bit more detail on the type of communications that you've seen. There are, I would say broadly, there's a formal means of communication, which may include things like leases and, letters and things like that. And then there's a more informal approach, which is, where you can communicate on social media, or you have a handshake agreement and things like that. Which have you seen work best? What are the kind of, tools that are employed by your members to execute upon their land partner communication strategy?
Well, the most important thing is that they find out what the landowner wants, right? So the answer to your question is yes, 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 and yes, right? It's all of those things, but not necessarily all of those things for every landowner. And so the main thing is that they need to be talking with their landowner and finding out what are the methods of communication that they like. What is the information that they want to see, and then to deliver on that, right? They are the customer. And so somebody once said that the customer is always right. Well, I would change that to say the customer may not be always right, but the customer is indeed always the customer. And so we need to treat them as such. So find out what they want and how they want it, and then to deliver on that. One other thing I would share is that farmers really need to be sharing more information with their landowners on other things, like the markets, input prices, equipment prices. How many landowners know that the cost of a combine now is about twice what it was 10 years ago? They probably have no idea. Well, how do they know? Farmers need to tell them. They need to be sharing that information with the landowner so that they understand all the different things that farmer is dealing with.
Okay. What advice would you have, Dave, for for some of these means of communication that you've seen, like some aspects of these communications that are absolutely pivotal, which you cannot do away with? Is there something that you would recommend to all of them across the board, saying, yeah, that is something, irrespective of the landowner, you need to have in place?
So I would say perhaps that number one thing is having a system for tracking things, whatever that system might be. It could be paper and pencil, I suppose, but you'd have to be very organized with that and so forth. Maybe it could be a spreadsheet, but each of those have limitations. But having some sort of a system for tracking the information that you have on that landowner, for tracking the information on the leases and so forth, because this information actually becomes a very important part of succession planning. And there's a lot of activity going on in succession planning as it pertains to farms. And most of that conversation talks about how do we transfer the land? How do we transfer the equipment, right? The wealth, the assets. And that's important. Don't get me wrong. There are a few people, Uncommon Farms is one, that talks about how do we transfer the management? How do we transfer the aspect of who's going to run the farm and that sort of thing beyond just the assets? And there's really hardly anybody outside of Oaken and I think Uncommon Farms that's talking about how do we transfer the information, right? The information on the landowner, the information on the leases and that communication, right? As a farm is passed down and the next generation takes over, there's information in that older generation's head that many times they end up taking to the grave with them. And that's unfortunate, and also it can be prevented. So having some sort of a system to capture all this information really becomes, I think, vital and often overlooked. And again, that's one of the things that I so appreciate about Oaken and what they're doing, is because that is a system for doing just that, and it's made for ag.
Just a future-looking question, which is, you touched upon this briefly, I think, in your previous kind of comments, which is agriculture as an industry has become extremely competitive. There's a lot of volatility on one side. Growers don't completely control prices on the other side. There's competition in terms of, production and all kinds of real estate and stuff like that. What would you advise two categories of farmers? One, who are entering the farming and agriculture business, who are setting up their business. What is your advice to them as they set up their operation and how they should be managing their business in general, and then specifically as it relates to landowner relationships? And then the other category of growers, which is the larger growers, members of yours who've been in farming for multi-generations, if you will, and then how they should be thinking about farming and then succession planning in this current environment.
Wow, you ask a lot of really big questions, and I'm trying to give you sound bites to address those questions, and that makes it tough. I think the first thing that comes to mind is on the finance side, right? Nobody's farming just to practice farming, right? You want to be profitable, and that profitability, the first thing that has to happen is your bookkeeping. And so we are certainly big advocates of doing accrual accounting, not just cash basis accounting. You have to do cash basis for your taxes, okay, but farms should also be doing accrual accounting for the management of the farm to help make sure that they know exactly how they are doing in any one given crop year, because between the inputs and the sales of their crops, there is activity for one crop year or one calendar year that might span 3 or 4 tax years or calendar years. And so farms never really know exactly how they're doing in one year unless they do accrual accounting. So I would think that's one of the main things. So for somebody that's setting up their business, or for somebody that's been around for decades and generations, they need to improve in their accounting so that they really know their cost of production. They know where everything's going, so then that way they can make adjustments. Too many times farms don't know if they made money until March when they're getting their taxes done. Well, guess what? There's no time left on the clock at that point, right? The year is already over. They can't do anything about it. So you need to be doing those that accrual accounting and be looking at things at a minimum on a quarterly basis. And the larger a farm gets, they need to be doing it more often. And so larger farms ought to be closing their books and looking at their statements and analyzing things on a monthly basis. Now, as it pertains then to landowner relations, I think what I might say there is to formulate a plan, and then all you have to do is follow that plan. I mentioned earlier how so many times farms get caught up in the urgent things as opposed to the important things. And that's the thing about landowner relations, is it's always very, very important, but it's hardly ever urgent. And so by having a plan kind of written out for the year, kind of, by month, or maybe it's, every half month, you kind of have some things you want to do, and there might not be something in every single one of those chunks of time, but in many of them there will be. And that way you can just follow that plan. And so we advocate having a calendar kind of all spelled out. We will help you put that together of what should be done in each of those segments, and then just follow the plan. And to maybe also have somebody who's going to be responsible for those things. They may not be the person who does it all, but there needs to be someone who's kind of been anointed to say, yes, you know what, you are the person who's going to be responsible to make sure all this gets done.
Okay. I have to ask you this question because I realized that as you were speaking, you were talking about a plan and communicating that with landowners. There has been a shift in the general landscape in terms of communication. I mean, the way communication was done 20 years ago is not the way it's done today anymore.
Yes.
Wide range of communication tools from social media upwards. Talk to us a little bit about how you've seen farmers use that medium to best engage with their land partners.
Well, one of the things that's really challenging for landowners is that, challenging for growers is that they have landowners of so many different ages, or people that they need to be in contact with that are so many different ages. And I don't mean to paint too much with a broad brush here. So many times we think of maybe an older person and like, well, they're never, they're not on social media. We don't need to worry about. Well, that's not true. I can remember my father, he's passed away now, but when he was age, I think it was 91, he had that boy had himself a Facebook page. So, so don't assume. That's the takeaway. Don't assume. But you do need to use a variety of different mediums, right? Whether it's phone, text, email, snail mail, and then there's about 1,000 different social media platforms nowadays. You can't be on all of them, because if you were, you wouldn't be doing any farming, right? So you've got to kind of pick and choose what are the 2 or 3 main ones that you're going to focus on, where you think your landowners reside, or your prospective landowners are, or just what you want to do. And then you need to communicate to those folks, because there are people who maybe they weren't on a given platform, but if you're putting content out there on a regular basis, maybe they take a look, maybe they join that platform. So in some cases, we can maybe get the landowner to kind of come to us on that particular platform, so to speak. But again, it kind of goes back to, where are they? How do they like to receive their communication? Right? It's our job as the grower to deliver back to the landowner on how they want to receive their information. It is very, very challenging, because there are so many different forms of communication that probably need to be used.
Okay.